Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, a podcast and website by, for, and about baby boomers. If you've been following along, you'll remember that we've been developing a way to kind of reduce stress in new situations, and then went into how how we can help our brain learn to automatically lead us into decisions that naturally help us fulfill our goals. And that's what we covered in the past 2 weeks. Those were on episodes from November 23rd and the 30th, the prior two episodes. So we're going to take that a little further. We'll do a real quick recap right now and how beliefs are formed for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, and how we can use this whole method or the reality of how beliefs are formed in our heads to our own advantage by trying to do some things purposefully instead of just as they happen naturally. And so as I reviewed from Dr. Shannon Irvine's coach, Dr. Shannon Irvine's neuro coaching course, a little tongue twister for me this evening, that in general, the first three aspects of how our learning happens, it can be described as: first, we come across a situation or a stimulus, and that's where something happens to us. We hear something, we see something, there's some event in the outside world happens, and then there's a thought. Somehow our brain at some level acknowledges that situation or stimulus. So if it's a song that you like, you either stop and take note of the song, or if it's a song you don't really care for, it's just playing in the background, you don't really pay attention to it, so-called elevator music. But one way or another, there's a thought that happens either consciously or subconsciously. Then there's a belief. A belief actually is when the same situation causes the same thought repeatedly. So every time you hear that song, you get the same thought. You hear that song, you say, oh, I remember that time I heard that. The first time I heard that song, I was at the beach. So pretty quickly, when you hear that song, you think of the beach. You don't have to go through the whole process of thinking, oh, I remember why that song has a special importance to me. It's because I heard it at the beach. The beach was a good time. It happens automatically. You hear the song, makes you smile. And so that's how a belief comes through. So again, that's the situation or stimulus, the thought that comes out of that stimulus, and then the belief that arises when you keep doing having that same thought repeatedly for the same stimulus. And it's important to note that. So it doesn't mean every time that you hear any song that you immediately smile and think of the beach. A belief is formed when the same stimulus happens and the same thought results from it. So like I said, we've covered that in the past, but that was a quick recap for somebody who might be joining us new this evening. And so we also cover that how by totally immersing ourselves in a desired outcome or goal, really envisioning something, all sorts of aspects, not just thinking about it, thinking about all the things around us, what other people are doing around us, how any smells or sights or sounds in that whole situation, by really immersing ourselves in that, including all the steps, and this is pretty important, all the steps that led to the outcome that we wanted, and how by looking at that accomplishment, particularly as something that's already happened. So instead of thinking, oh, if I could, and I'll use language tonight for, I think I've used it before, but I'll use it again. So instead of thinking, boy, if I could speak a language really well, this is what would happen. Instead, you look at it and envision it from the standpoint of, oh, remember how when I was learning language, I tried this and this was the outcome that happened. And you visualize what you wanted to have happen, that you walked up to the vendor in the street and you said something to them and they smiled at you and they said, oh yes, I have two of those right here. And they understood you and they asked you a simple question, you answered it. That's the outcome you want to have happen. So by practicing that and really envisioning that as a past thing that happened, what can happen is eventually that becomes the reality for your brain. And so we're going to go into why that's really important. And so with that, if you have any questions on the things I went through, I know that was a real quick recap and probably not terribly well put together. Again, listen to the episodes of the prior 2 weeks, the ones from November 23rd and November 30th. And we talk more about that and how and the steps to accomplish that and the results and some of what's going on. But really the new material for tonight, what I want to talk about tonight, is why it works at all, the real reasoning behind why the envisioning technique has the effects that we want on our brain, and what we're really trying to accomplish by doing this. So in kind of way of history, our brains are very nicely designed to generally keep us safe. Besides doing all the myriad of functions that they do, of, we control our temperature and our balance and regulate all our internal systems in our body and all that other stuff. That all happens at kind of a very semi-automatic level. But then there's another whole aspect to it, in that the real function of our brains is to make sure that we're still around tomorrow to keep doing things and improving ourselves and improving the world and helping, keep the species going and all those things that nature likes to do. And so within that, your brain naturally, naturally as in not it naturally happens, but one of the core functions of your brain is really to keep us safe and not put us in situations with unknown outcomes. And so if not that it doesn't want to do anything different, but it really only likes to do things that it can kind of predict what's likely going to happen. So if you're going to walk up the hill, okay, that's fine. The brain sees that as a challenge. So I've walked up hills before. A lot of times in the top of hills, there's a meadow, and in the meadow, there's good food to eat. So you walk up the hill. But if you come to a very steep hill and you look up and you see cliffs, you're kind of like, wow, I've never climbed a cliff before. I don't know what to do. And it automatically discourages you from doing something that you're just not used to doing. And so another way to look at it is that if you've done it before and you have some idea what the outcome is, or if you can take that prior outcome and extrapolate it to your current situation, then probably your brain is going to be supportive of whatever it is you're trying to do. If, however, you're doing something that you haven't done before, and now you have no idea what the outcome may be, in general, your brain is not going to be supportive of that. And so that comes on, becomes more visible, more present as we get into more and more situations as we get older. And so in childhood, you have fewer experiences and certainly fewer negative experiences. And so children are more typically more risk takers because they don't know bad possible outcomes. And then usually by the time they hit the teenage years or the young adult years, there's a lot of things that we've learned and have built into our normal actions. So, like I said, this whole nice conservative approach to living works pretty well in general. And so another example is, we see a little rickety old bridge across the stream and our brain remembers it, or, we've seen it happen before, that, boy, you see a bridge that looks pretty beat up. We're probably not going to walk across it because it might break. However, if all of a sudden we turn around, we see that there's a bear chasing us, your brain has a whole bunch of things about, bears chasing me in the woods. Then it weighs things. The same rickety bridge suddenly becomes a pretty good option for getting away from the bear. So your brain is pretty adept at taking not only a single situation, but assessing that situation against other possible situations that are arising in real time. So, like I said, you're going through and you're afraid to speak a language, say, but then all of a sudden you're in an emergency situation. You need medical help, or you need a policeman, or you need directions back to the hotel. Suddenly your brain goes, well, if I speak, 10 seconds before you realized you were lost, your brain is going, well, if I speak, people might laugh at me. 10 seconds later, you realize you're lost. And now your brain is going, the only way back to the hotel is to try and ask somebody for directions. So I might as well try asking them in whatever language I'm trying to learn. So your brain is very adept at analyzing situations and doing trade-offs and weighing back and forth what it might try and do. So the general thing, though, as we've seen now, the real problem arises that when you have this nice caring brain, and then you kind of couple that with your overactive imagination. And so typically what happens is that tends to lead everyone, most of us, into envisioning often very negative potential outcomes. And so for whatever reason, I don't know if it's all societies, but certainly in Western society, a lot of times if there's something, if we're going into an unknown situation, and I've mentioned this before, by training, I'm an engineer. And so basically by training, I look for dangerous things or reasons why things won't work, because if something doesn't work, there's a potential for somebody to get hurt. And so that kind of carries over into everyday life. When we come across an unknown situation, we tend to think of all the negative consequences. So going back into that, the perceived dangerous situation I was just describing, of trying to speak a foreign language in public for the first time, our natural tendency is to kind of imagine all the worst possible outcomes, that, whoever we're talking to won't understand us, that they start laughing at us at our horrible speaking, or that people are turning around looking at us trying to figure out what we're trying to say. And we've met a number of people that don't speak our native tongues very well, and we don't do that to them in general. And they have the courage to try it. So we know that it's possible, but our own internal systems tend to try and keep us really safe. And so we tend not to take chances. So one of the interesting things that comes out of this, or reasons this happens, is because we tend not to give our brains and our subconscious enough information. So we walk into a new situation. We've known we're going to try and go out. Say I'm studying Spanish. I have for years and still don't speak it well enough, but that's another whole story. So we're going to a place where Spanish is spoken, and we decide, okay, when I get to Spain, when I get to Mexico, when I get to Argentina, wherever we're going, I'm going to speak Spanish. And so do we spend any time generally saying, oh, this is how it could come out really well. This is what happens when I try and speak to somebody and don't speak very clearly, but I'm clearly making an effort and they're very supportive of me. No, typically what we tend to do is think about all the worst possible outcomes, that I'll go to the store and nobody will be able to understand what I'm trying to say, and I'll leave the store without being able to buy what I needed or wanted, or that I'll go to somebody and they just say how terrible my language is. And so our brain now is all primed with nothing but negative potential outcomes. And so instead of preparing our brain and in that way, what would happen if instead we spent a bunch of time beforehand envisioning a totally different outcome, that we had 5 or 8 little phrases that we had memorized and we knew some vocabulary. And so we go and try to speak to somebody about whatever the situation is. I want to buy a can of a bottle of water and a bagel. And we practice all those words, and in our mind, envision that we go up and say that to somebody, and they get a big smile in the face and they thank us for trying to speak their language. And maybe they correct us a little bit, and not in a negative way, just say, oh, say it this way instead, and more people understand you. And there's this really all these wonderful positive outcomes from it. Or, even more amazing, they ask us a simple little question, where are you staying, or where do you live? And we answer it. We say, oh, in Nueva York, vive en Nueva York. And they go, oh, bueno. And so you have all these positive things out of it. Now, this is where the magic really starts to happen. If we'd been envisioning this, really envisioning it like we talked about it, with all our senses, with the sounds around us, with the smells and people and the noises and the sun shining down on us, and all sorts of positive things that we would want to be that situation to be. And if we look at it from the standpoint of, yes, I've done this before and this is how it has happened, all of a sudden our brain will actually help guide us into a situation where we're likely to succeed. Because now we've given our brain, our subconscious, all our inner thoughts, a different picture to look at. Before we were just giving it negative pictures. Now we give it this nice positive outcome. And our brain is, when a situation arises, now our brain has a lot more to weigh the whole situation out. It goes, oh, they might laugh at us. That's a possibility. But they might be really nice. That's another possibility. And it's a real possibility, because we've gone through this many times, and I've seen how it can happen because it's happened in your head. So now your brain believes that it can happen. And so now you're walking along, and instead of looking down at the ground and not talking to anybody and hoping nobody looks at you and asks you something, you actually might actively look for somebody who seems like they're approachable, who seems like they're friendly. And instead of not trying to say anything, we'll actually just naturally now, because we have a whole different view of the topic, naturally walk up to that stranger and give it our best shot. And speaking with them, and we'll do it with naturally more confidence, because our subconscious and our whole view on the situation is supporting us. And it's not trying to prevent us from doing it, because now it sees that there can be a good outcome to it as well. So it's a whole different way of approaching it. And that last sentence there had a really important concept in it, because by envisioning our desired outcome and practicing it in our heads, now our actions and our subconscious thoughts and our goals, I'll say that again, our actions, our subconscious thoughts, and our goals, they're all in alignment. And when things are in alignment, we naturally tend to feel empowered or confident or encouraged to do something. If you're going along doing any particular task, whether it's at work or at home, let's pick at work because it's more fun to pick on work, excuse me, and you're asked to do something and it's something you really don't feel that either you should be doing or that you want to do or that it's the right thing to do, you don't do it with a lot of energy, and you don't do it with a lot of confidence, and you don't feel good about it. But if you're doing something and you really are enthusiastic about it, and you feel it's the right thing to do or something you're very confident about, then it just happens naturally. You put a lot of effort in, but it doesn't seem like a lot of effort. You get good results, but it's not because you had to just bust your back to do it. It's because it just happened naturally, because it was your goals and your thoughts and your actions were all in alignment. Now, our goals and our thoughts and our actions, actions, thoughts, and goals are not in alignment. This is when we feel stress or fear, and very common that we'll describe it as overwhelm. We're just overwhelmed by the situation. We're uncomfortable because our minds and our heart, we actually don't think that what we're doing right now is either the best thing for the situation or what we really want to do, or that it's personally risky, like somebody might laugh at us or call us a fool or whatever. And so you see that a lot in things that aren't necessarily in modern society. It happens. Things might not be physically dangerous. It's not like you're trying to walk out on the observation deck that has a glass floor. No matter how much you convince your mind that it's not going to fall down, you can see all the way to the ground and you just don't want to do it. Usually, or very often, I should say, in modern society, a lot of the things that make us scared are our perceptions of others, how others will perceive us. And so that's something that we have a lot of control over for a number of reasons. One is by practicing a good possible outcome, then what we'll find out is we act more confident. And when we act more confident, people tend to respond to us in a more positive way. That just happens naturally. If you go in and you start speaking with authority on something, not overbearing, but just you feel you know the topic, and you feel good about the topic, and you feel it's going to benefit other people, well, then you just speak well on it. And when people hear somebody talking like that, then they're going to believe them. They're going to be interested in it, and they're going to tend to support them. And so, here we are now. We just went through a situation and we had two possible outcomes. It could be that we tried to speak to somebody and we envisioned that it was going to be terrible and we're going to be laughed at. Or the other one we envisioned was that we tried to speak to somebody and we had a good outcome. The only difference between these two scenarios is that in the first, we practiced envisioning the desired outcome. And in the second, we gave our brain no help or training in what to expect. And so when you enter a challenging situation in that regard, our brain is going to take the conservative way out. And what it's going to do is try and discourage you from entering that particular situation. And so you see somebody, if you've done nothing to prepare yourself for it, you think nothing but negative thoughts about your abilities, and then you see somebody who's just talking to strangers, you go, I'll go up and talk to them. Your brain's going, no, don't do it, because it's looking at it and all the things you have been priming it for have bad outcomes. So it's going to say, no, don't get yourself into a situation that has a bad outcome. And if you just envision the positive outcome, now your brain can see that there's a possibility that things could be good as well as bad. And if you really did a good job priming your brain for a good outcome, then it's just going to naturally want to push you towards doing things that put you in that situation that before you were scared of. We're going to talk a lot more about this. I know there's kind of a lot of information. It seems like a simple concept, but there's a lot of things behind it. And I think the most important part to realize is that you have the ability to retrain your brain and replace, we talked about this a little bit before, replace your limiting beliefs and your expected outcomes with your desired outcomes and your goals. And finally, you can get to the point where your thoughts and your actions and your goals are all in alignment. And when you get to that point, then you actually naturally act with a lot more confidence, and you'll find that you'll go into situations that you wouldn't have tried before, because now you have some idea of what to expect, even though you haven't actually done it. You've really walked through a particular situation and seen that this has potential for good outcomes, and your brain will take that information and use it to guide you to the outcome that you want. So that's kind of it for tonight. I know it's only one topic. We kind of beat it to death a little bit, but it's a really critical topic, and we'll come back to it again probably. And next time I'll try and have some diagrams to maybe get things a little clearer, because I realized as I was saying it, there's actually some interesting concepts there that aren't necessarily clear in words. So we'll see what we can do for next week. But that's it. And again, this is kind of the introduction to the course 1 Minute to Happiness. And that's a course that's currently in development. And it's a way to, through simple self-education and then some guided instruction, to perceive the world in a new and more engaging way, and to learn how to control your beliefs and open up the power within you by aligning your inner beliefs with your heartfelt goals, so that your actions naturally bring you towards your goals. So that's it for the week. Thank you very much for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along. If not, please drop me a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Have a great week. Thanks for visiting. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everybody. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.